we try to identify social injustice that we kind of feel needs to be talked about and that we, kind of are affected by. And then we try to work with some of the best people in the world in that space and try to come up with, zany, creative ideas to make people laugh, and then also to get people thinking about that subject and hopefully write into their local MP or go attend a protest or whatever it is that happens, so that we can actually see social change. And over the last, 10 years since we've been doing it, we've seen the introduction of medical cannabis in Australia. We've seen the decriminalisation of all drugs in the ACT. We've seen the decriminalisation of cannabis in the Australian Capital Territory.
Welcome to Steel's Success. Interviews with felons of flourishing about how they stole thriving lives from the authorities of conformity, comfort and fear. I'm Rob Farquhar, your host, and in each chat I'll find out how my guest made the bold moves that most people avoid, so that the rest of us can break out of our comfort zones, grift the rules of polite society, and think a little more criminal. Let's get stuck in. How do I introduce a fella like Will Stolk? I mean, when I asked him in the pre-chat to send a bio through, he just replied, "Google me," which unleashed a positive torrent of articles on him. He's a former pro skier, he is a biotech company owner, and a passionate prankster activist. But what comes up the most is Will's enthusiasm, not just for cannabis, but for legalising it. Before anyone questions his commitment, it's definitely worth pointing out that he and co-prankster Alex Zammit, otherwise known as Craze, were both arrested for a stunt back in 2022 where they projected images of cannabis leaf and the caption "Who are we hurting?" on no less a public structure than Sydney's worldwide famous Opera House. Thankfully, they were cleared of all charges in 2024, which especially glad for, so that we could have this chat today. But if that wasn't enough, and other acts of stunt activism weren't enough to keep him busy, and we'll get into that list a little bit later on, Will also runs a marketing agency, People Like Us Creative. He runs a biotech company out of Byron Bay, dedicated to creating a clear labelling standard for cannabis, not just in Australia, but ideally worldwide. This scruffy bastard is certainly making a restrained person like myself look very bad in comparison with everything that he's done with his life. Will, thank you very much for coming on Sydney After Sunset.
G'day Rob, how are you today, mate?
I am very well, although, somewhat in awe of all of the stuff that you have achieved over the years.
Just to update you, the biotech company, it's actually, we have several cannabis companies. We've got a holding company and we've invested in several cannabis companies in the United States. Now we're expanding into Europe and into Australia, and we do have a biotech division.
That is incredible. I was reading very briefly a little bit earlier on that you guys were sponsoring a growing farm near Yosemite National Park in the States. Have I got that right?
Yeah, we opened our first cannabis dispensary in 2019, in October of 2019. My friend and I, who I used to compete around the world with in big mountain freestyle competitions and stuff like that, different kinds of ski comps, my friend Corey Zyler. It's at the bottom of Yosemite National Park. He's also gone on to open another one in Mammoth, and we're working on potentially opening some more. We've got a flower company called Pheno Hunts, which is in about 20 shops in California. As you can see, that's our Tioga Green, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, we've been doing that, and now we're expanding into Australia and into Europe, and hopefully soon into New York State. And we've got a lot of different things in the pipeline at the moment. And yeah, it's been a little bit of a crazy ride. A lot of sacrifices gone into it. It's been a little bit of a process having to operate out of Australia because we've got a lot of, there's a lot of red tape here to be able to do business in the cannabis industry. A lot of the cannabis businesses have a kind of a build it and they will come attitude where they raise a lot of money and then they invest it into the cannabis space, and then they have a hard time making the ROI back because of all the red tape of the TGA medicinal cannabis companies in Australia aren't allowed to advertise, which makes it very difficult for them to get users on their platforms, and it's just a very difficult industry to exist in Australia. That's why we've targeted the United States, specifically California first, because I have a background of obviously I ski a lot and I've spent a lot of my life in California, and that's where we invested our first money, and now we're expanding into Europe. The Czech Republic has just legalized home use cannabis and decriminalized the growing of homegrown cannabis. They've already had an existing medical cannabis infrastructure. Germany's now medical, looking to go rec, or looking to go adult use, as they call it. And Switzerland is supposedly potentially going adult use as well. So a lot of new territories in Europe are emerging, and there's a lot of potential for the market to grow into a, it already is a multi-billion-dollar empire, but probably it's just going to, probably 10x in the next 5 to 10 years. But it's a very, it's an interesting beast. You really have to be strategic about where you put your money so you can get your ROI back, because of, you can't, there's a lot of stringent controls, and obviously because it is seen as an illicit substance in a lot of places in the world. So, it's been a little bit of a teething process to figure out where we kind of put the chess pieces, so to speak, so we can hopefully take over the world.
Well, if there were ever an evil scheme to take over the world, I am glad that at least involves cannabis. So tell me a little bit. I did read that, of course, you discovered the substance back in 2015 by way of an apple bong, I believe. But
no, that was 2002.
Oh, 2002. Bloody heck, I am getting my dates wrong.
That was when I was probably 14. How old am I now? I'm 38 now, so I was about 14, I think. That was at a ski camp in Whistler, and with a friend of mine who ended up becoming a very famous pro skier named Stephen Thomas. I had smoked weed once or twice before that in Australia, but yeah, that was probably going to Whistler for summer camp, and the freedom that I had there. I definitely discovered my love and identity of being a pothead.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about what is it that fosters this love of cannabis in you? What does it bring out in you? What does it do for you?
Probably makes me more creative. It opens my mind to the different creative aspects of planet Earth. And I just enjoy things more, like I don't smoke every day anymore, because it's not really congruent with my lifestyle, because I'm busy and I've got multiple companies to run, and I need to be on point. Before I was smoking a lot of dope because, I was a professional athlete, and all I had to do was, go skiing and film and shoot photos. It's still a lot of work, but it's not really, you don't really need to be super professional and on point consistently. You do in a different kind of aspect. I still do smoke a lot of weed, but only sporadically, probably just on the weekend at the moment. And, it makes food better, it makes sex better, it makes partying better, and it's just more healthy for you than drinking alcohol. I still like to drink sometimes. I used to be sponsored by Fireball, and I was working for Fireball as one of their creative directors here in Australia for quite a couple of years. And so, I love to party, but lately I've just kind of toned down my partying because I'm trying to focus on the world domination thing. And as Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. So I changed my ways a little bit and became more disciplined, and slowly but surely we're getting closer to the goal.
Oh, God. So you're here getting out of the party scene right as I am slowly starting to explore it. Seems like an ironic piece of timing.
I still partake in it, definitely, but it's just a sporadic thing, Australia's nightlife's kind of gone down the toilet in the last probably 5 years. There are little pockets that are good, and it is getting better. Obviously today, in the last week or so, they've finally changed the lockout laws in Sydney, which could be impactful. But by this time, the beast is almost dead and drying in the sun, so to speak. There are little pockets that are emerging, but the Sydney that I grew up with, because I'm from Narrabeen in Sydney, and my parents used to run three very famous Mexican restaurants called Tex-Mex on the Northern Beaches and in Coogee. They won Best Mexican in Australia 4 times. So I grew up with alcohol and infused awesomeness in my life from a very young age. My parents are very wild. I'm very wild. But it's not that I don't want to go out. It's just that I don't see that many events or things that trigger my interest, to be honest. I do, I really enjoy going out. I love going to the Maxim parties. We do a lot of collaborations with people. We did the Black Tape Project a couple of months ago. We did the FHM Halloween party. I did the Maxim magazine before they closed down. That was a year and a half ago. 2 years ago we did the big Valentine's Day party. We've done a lot of after parties for Snoop Dogg and for Nelly and for all sorts of stuff with my friend Benny. So I'm still very entrenched in the nightlife scene. But to be honest with you, it just doesn't excite me as much. I don't think it's because I've gotten a bit older, because when I go overseas, I still love to party and I go out a lot. But these days, I'm back on the Gold Coast now. I was living in Sydney for the majority of 2025. But, I just found that I'd go out and it'd just be the same shit over and over again. It was pretty lame, to be honest. Sydney's a good daytime city. Obviously, you go on the island, you go on yacht club, you go on a nice super yacht with a bunch of hot girls, and then maybe you go to a cool bar afterwards, and you always end up at a hotel. But in general, the nightlife scene in Sydney has kind of been a little bit lackluster of late, in my opinion. Melbourne still has, a lot of good places like Electric and Bar Bambi and, Naked for Satan and different other clubs that are going off. But, even on New Year's Day this year, I went to Revolver at 4 o'clock in the morning with a bunch of girls. This is a few weeks ago, and it wasn't that busy. So I think that the probably the silent recession and inflation and the cost of living has just also, the younger generation, they're not drinking as much. I think it is affecting nightlife, and I think that the scene has kind of died down quite significantly comparatively to 5 or 10 years ago. That might just be my opinion, but I think a lot of people would agree with me.
I'm definitely on here to find out a little bit more about what's going on in the city nightlife, so your opinion is certainly welcome. So it seems like it's a combination. It's easy to point at the lockout laws, but as you mentioned, there are a few other factors involved in Sydney's decline. Would it be a simple matter of trying to bring some variety back into the event scene?
I personally think that Sydney's a little bit of a strange city. I'm from Sydney. I'm from the Northern Beaches. So, I'm Sydney through and through. So I'm allowed to have my opinion about the city that I came from. A lot of people come to Sydney as what surfers would call blow-ins and try to claim it as their city and try to claim that they have some kind of superior opinion about it. But, I've been through a lot of different eras since I was a young kid. And in my, opinion, I think that the beginning of the end was the lockout laws back in, I think, 2009, 2010. And also the fact that they started implementing poker machines in a lot of the famous places that had live music. Sydney, when I was very young and in my parents' era, was, a very famous city, and it was a worldwide renowned city for live music. And slowly over the years, that changed to profit, and then, all these pubs started getting it. They used to have bands every Friday, Saturday night. They started having poker machines, and then less and less bands played. Then the lockout laws started after that poor young guy got king hit by some little dick douchebag, and that's just kind of set off a chain of events where slowly but surely Sydney's nightlife went from being a world epicenter to something that, I've had a lot of friends come around from around the world, and they're like, this is one of the worst major cities in the world for nightlife.
Pretty damning indictment from the sounds of it. I mean, I've been back a little while, and I see a lot of signs around for what they say are VIP rooms, which just seem like pokey machine dens. And if you're going to be going out, then, as you say, there's not much in the way of at least bands anyway. You'll have, and I don't want to cast any aspersions, especially as I've started this podcast out talking with a DJ, and I've got a few more lined up to chat with. But it does seem like that the music scene is techno and live mixing rather than bands and the like.
Totally, but just even venues that do that, like there's not that many good. I can't think of one world-renowned nightclub in Sydney, like something that would be on the level of an LA or a New York or a Tokyo or an Ibiza or a Parisian nightclub. Like there's there's Susudio, there's Noir, they're all right, they're not bad, but like they're not on a worldwide level in my opinion. Like you go out and like you don't have an epic night, not very often. But I think that there are exceptions to the rules now. There are emerging places. There are the old gems like Oxford Arts Factory. There is that other nightclub that opened with the similar group of the Noir homies. Shout out to Ronnie and the boys there. But in general, like I think that the fact that kids aren't drinking as much and the fact that, obviously lockout laws, the rising cost of living, I don't know, and Australia's just so far away from the rest of the world. Melbourne's always been seen as the superior city for partying. It definitely still is. But, Sydney's still got the fact that it's probably the most beautiful aesthetic city in the world. The only other city that might be on a similar level aesthetically might be Rio de Janeiro or maybe Vancouver. But these cities, they don't have the same kind of harbour that we do. So Sydney, in my opinion, is still one of the best daytime cities for partying. But at night, I think that we're really, lacking.
Yeah, I have seen a few more ads crop up for events that say in bed by 10 and all that kind of thing, rather than being late night. So
that's pretty fucking lame if you're gonna have an event that's like in bed by 10. Most people in Spain don't go out till fucking 10 or 11, That's fucking lame, dude. Like, we're meant to be a worldwide city, and like we haven't been a worldwide city probably since probably 2015, maybe even earlier. Other than like really dope parties that we've had, and I'm sure they're out there. Like I'm sure there's some really cool raves and some stuff like that I'm not exposed to. But that I'd be really stoked to have my opinion proven wrong, because I want to have a good time. I want to live in a cool city. And I moved back to Sydney after living up on the Gold Coast for a couple of years. Last year, and I spent maybe 6 months in Sydney again, and I hadn't lived there for a couple of years, and on and off I'm there like once a month for probably 4 to 5 days, pretty consistently, and I went out quite a lot, and I just found it really boring. And I also think that Sydney's a strange city because of the little microcosmoses of Sydney. You've got the Northern Beaches, you've got the North Shore, you've got the eastern suburbs, you've got out west, and then you've got, the Shire. And like these groups of people don't really interact that much. So I don't think that Sydney really supports each other. I don't think it supports creators, and I don't think it has that much of a support in the music scene. I think that people kind of have this attitude of like the haves, and there's a big difference between the haves and the have-nots. And I think that really counteracts Sydney on a worldwide level. And I think that Melbourne is a lot more collaborative, and there a lot more people they all come from the rest of the city into the centre of the city, whether it's on Chapel Street or in the city, places like Miss Collins or Electric or whatever other slew of bars that there are. And, they seem to support each other a lot more than what Sydney does.
From the sounds of it, deeply entrenched, as you mentioned, geographical and societal issues, and just lack of internal support. There's not really that sense of the city as a community.
Well, there is the community, but like if you go to Noir, it's mostly it's like urban, and it's a lot of people from the area and from like out west. Like Northern Beaches people don't really go to stuff like that. And then eastern suburbs people, most of them will go to if it's like hot girls, they'll go to the island, and then they'll go probably to either the Ivy or to Susudio, and maybe to what's the place that's changed names 1,000 times in Double Bay, But that place is not really that great, you know, and it hasn't been for years. So it's like really, it's just the same. It's the same old fiddle over and over again. And people open other clubs, and they don't really. They play the same shitty music that they did 20 fucking years ago. Like, no one really does anything avant-garde and outside the box, in my opinion. I think Brisbane's got a much better party scene than Sydney does, in my opinion. Like, it's much better. Sydney's probably the third city in Australia for going out and nightlife. I think Melbourne's probably number one, Brisbane a close second, and then now, obviously Sydney. But, hopefully these lockout laws change things, and hopefully we start to see a rejuvenation in the system and in the society, so that, live music comes back, good nightclubs come back, more DJs are touring here, big festivals. We're doing a big collaboration soon with Rolling Loud that's coming in March with the magazine I run, Frank 151 from New York. So, things like this in a post-COVID world, it's taken a few years for us to get back to where we were, in 2019. And where we were in 2019 wasn't in that good of a position. Some people might say that, I'm jaded. I probably am a little bit. But, I've been to a lot of the best places. I go out quite a lot. I get invited to a lot of parties. And it just doesn't seem that exciting anymore.
You have a ton on your plate with all these initiatives. I mean, you are running the biotech companies in Byron Bay. You are an editor for Frank 151. How do you manage to cram it all within a day or within a week? How do you keep on top of it?
Time allotments. So I have a to-do list for each thing.
Oh, fantastic.
For each subject, each silo. And then I go through, that's like day-to-day, Frank stuff, people like us stuff, and then Byron Bay Bio stuff. So there's actually 5 lists here. 5 lists. So I go through the list. I also have my other list here. And I silo my time. And I go, morning I wake up early. I wake up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll do all the phone calls to America. Then I'll do a bunch of Frank stuff like posting and all that kind of stuff. Then at around 8:30, 9, I'll go for a surf normally. Then I'll come back. Then I'll work from probably 10:30, 11 till maybe 2. Then I'll either go for a walk. I'll have a nap. Then I'll come back, do another few hours work. Then go to the gym. Then eat. Then go to sleep. And that's pretty much my routine. Excuse me.
That's all right. No, glad to hear you got things pretty much locked in.
It's about siloing time and also working with collaborations. I have a lot of people that I work with. And it's not that hard. With AI's made it a lot easier. You just really got to silo your time and just focus on one thing when you're doing it. It's a similar way to how Elon Musk does it when he goes from SpaceX to Tesla. When he's at Tesla, he's just focused on Tesla, and when he's at SpaceX, he's just focused on SpaceX. Now, obviously, I'm not functioning at Elon Musk level, not quite yet. But a big inspiration was Virgil Abloh, who worked for Louis Vuitton, who interned under a friend of mine at Victoria's Secret a long time ago. And Virgil said, have 5 or 6 different creative passions that you do. I also spent a lot of time doing street art. That's kind of how I've started preoccupying my time so I don't party. And then I'm on the phone a lot. So it's not that difficult. It's not easy. I do a lot of work. And things can fall to the wayside. But as long as you've got lists and you stay on point and you silo your time and you focus on that one thing, you can get a lot done.
I'm a bit curious about people like us creative. It was one of the subjects that there wasn't as much information online about as, of course, perhaps the more inflammatory stuff like the cannabis and the activism that you've been doing. So when did people like us creative start?
It started in probably about 2014, 15. After I quit skiing professionally, I was running a online magazine called Ballin' on a Budget, which is that one right there. I had 1 million followers on Facebook, 1.1 million followers on Facebook. We were averaging about 8 million page views a month. Then we started the agency. We started doing a lot of music videos. We did music videos with Snoop and with Tiger, and with Bliss and Esso, and with Cursor, and with Sean Kingston, and we're working with a lot of brands like Red Bull and Fireball and all sorts of stuff. It's basically like a creative collective, kind of like Wu-Tang. It's a group of different filmers and different photographers and different street artists, and we've done all sorts of stuff. And it's just kind of like, I just kind of pick and choose the projects that I want to do through relationships. I'm not consistently working on that all the time, but I pick and choose my stuff. We pretty much do everything from music videos to lookbooks to photo shoots for brands to collaborative stuff with using Frank as an output. I'm now working on a distribution network that I'm putting together with some other people that I'm not really at liberty to mention at this present time, because it's not good to talk about things until they're finished. So that's kind of a side project. We're also working on a couple of documentaries at the moment with some pretty high level people, and we're also working on a documentary that's probably going to be coming out on one of the biggest streaming platforms on planet Earth about our history and about the documentary is called Anti-Establishmentarianism, and it's about the art of discourse and protest and its impacts on the society, and basically the impacts on society and how it's impacted societal change over the last 150 years.
Now, I can of course see that you've been doing these acts of protest for pretty much the last 10 or so years, and it seems a little bit of an arrogant question to ask, given that sometimes these things can take a while, but what have you seen happen as a result of all these things that you've done? I mean, I did particularly like the Ganja Army one that you did.
The one with Lad
I
Bible,
believe that was earlier this year with
Jeremy Buckingham, who's also a legalised cannabis party member who's in New South Wales Parliament. What kind of impact do we make? Really, like, we kind of do it as kind of tongue-in-cheek humour. We don't really try to fuck with people. We don't try to disrupt traffic, or, we don't try to really, we try to make fun of the elephant in the room, so to speak, in a humorous way that makes people talk. So I think that we've contributed in quite a great way to making people talk about subjects that need to be talked about. And other than that, we're involved in discourse, and we work with companies, and we work with we've worked with Sea Shepherd, and we've worked with Aboriginal activists when we did that, Invasion Day protest a couple of years ago on the Opera House, on the fireworks smoke of the Australia Day fireworks. So it's just kind of like kind of causes that Alec and I relate to, and we kind of like just want to talk about the elephant in the room. If you remember that Banksy piece that he did in one of his first shows, where he hired an elephant and he painted it pink and put it in the middle of his gallery show, and the whole idea was to talk about the elephant in the room. And so we try to identify social injustice that we kind of feel needs to be talked about, and that we kind of are affected by, and then we try to work with some of the best people in the world in that space and try to come up with zany creative ideas to make people laugh, and then also to get people thinking about that subject, and hopefully write into their local MP or go attend a protest or whatever it is that happens, so that we can actually see social change. And over the last 10 years since we've been doing it, we've seen the introduction of medical cannabis in Australia. We've seen the decriminalisation of all drugs in the ACT. We've seen the decriminalisation of cannabis in the Australian Capital Territory, and we've also seen the partial legalisation of homegrown. I think you're allowed to grow 4 plants per household or something like that in the ACT. So we've seen quite a lot of progression. The war has not been won even close yet. We need worldwide legalisation of adult use of cannabis. We also need to abolish these crazy drug driving laws, because these laws test for the presence of cannabis, and cannabis after you smoke it. If you're a medical cannabis patient, you can take your medicine, and then it could be in your system for up to 3 weeks with the swab test, and they're not the swab test doesn't test for impairment, and the law states that you're too impaired to be able to drive your vehicle. Now, I'm not advocating for people to get high and go drive, but if you need to take medicine like you do for epilepsy, or you need to take Seroquel for whatever mental illness that you have, or whatever ailment that you have, you shouldn't be misjudged by the society for taking that, and that shouldn't disallow you from driving your motor vehicle. So there's a lot of unjust laws that need to be changed, and we just like to talk about the elephant in the room. We like to make people laugh and cause a little mischief and get a lot of attention on the subject, and hopefully that starts the butterfly effect to hopefully inflict some change.
It does seem like there is an art of finding that line between making people laugh but not letting them be reassured by their own laughter, like, oh, it's all okay, to keep them still, after they've had the laugh, to just make them think that little bit about what it is they've just laughed at, and maybe
that goes back to the propagation of it. Alec and I both work in the creative industries, so we film everything to a top level. We both work in PR, so we have a lot of media contacts. And if you're going to do something, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound, and you really got to shout it to the top of the trees and the top of the mountains to be able to propagate what you've done out into the universe. Not everything's going to be a hit. We've done a couple of publicity stunts that got fuck all attention, that cost us a lot of money to do and a lot of time and a lot of effort, but not every you can't always have lightning in a bottle, so you've got to have your hit and misses, and you just got to keep on doing it, because it's the fact of doing it in the first place. And if you see something socially unjust in your society, you should stand up and fight for it. You should protest. You should go picket fences. You should go do publicity stunts, because this is what democracy is all about. It's about free speech, and it's about standing up for what you believe in. My great-grandfather was in a German prisoner of war camp for like 5 or 6 years. He almost died. I'm sure there's many examples of people's family history like that. And when they went to war on this premise of like certain things of democracy that we stood for in a Western world, which was freedom of speech, which should be the number one, and freedom of passage and freedom of religion. And a lot of these freedoms are getting taken away from us through draconian laws. United we should stand, divided we fall, so to speak. I kind of fucked that saying up, but you understand what I mean. Like, all this social injustice in the world, we need to stand up and fight against it, or we'll turn around and it'll be Orwellian, control, and it'll be like 1984. And it's already starting to get to that point.
Yeah, quite a bit. We do. It is getting very easy, and I think perhaps even goes a little bit back to what you were saying earlier on about the Sydney nightlife scene. It is getting a lot easier for people to sequester themselves within their homes and busy themselves with distractions, rather than putting themselves out and embracing some comfort and taking some risks, which, I don't know, I'm a guy in my late 40s, and I think I am still yet to discover what it is that I will get my ass out and put myself on a picket line and a protest line for. So fingers crossed that's something that I hope to discover within the next, sometime soon.